What is up, BGE tabletop community? Today I talk with Prisha from India, and we talk about her experience running a board game cafe, and I share some insights about using educational programming at that cafe too. Before we get into that topic, I do want to share a couple quick updates with you. Be sure you are subscribed to our Instagram and TikTok. I'll leave some links below. And also, we're going to be at the Northridge Mall in the Los Angeles area. So if you're in LA, come stop by, come say hi. We'll be there all of November, all of December, and likely part of January. And I mention our Instagram and our TikTok because we'll have some special things on those social media channels coming soon as we get ready to open at the mall in November. So let's get into that conversation. All right, so I'm here with Prisha, and she is in India, so I'm excited to chat, and she runs a board game cafe in India. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about the cafe, and then we'll talk about what we're talking about for today?
Hello to all the beautiful board gamers and educators out there. I'm Prisha from India. We run a small board gaming cafe in Mumbai by the name of Kingdom of Board Games. We have been around past 2 years. So me and my husband, we got into this hobby around 4 or 5 years back, and then we had a small collection. And then our friends and our cousins would get really excited, when they joined us for playing these modern board games. So, slowly and gradually, we thought it would be a cool idea to open up our collection for general public. And that's how this dream project came to life.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Board gaming culture is quite new in India, but then I'm happy that, I'm witnessing how this culture is slowly growing and, how more and more people are getting to know about this. So it's amazing.
That's really cool. Yeah, I don't, like I was mentioning, I'm not familiar with India very, very much. I don't know a lot about it. I know, like I said, I know a couple of the cities and a little bit about the geography. But I've lived in China and other parts of Asia and Taiwan and South Korea, and it's really interesting to see the board game culture in different places. I mean, even different culture within the U.S. Like, I feel like, I don't know, at least in my experience, I feel like board games are really big in Texas. Maybe it's just like they have some really big stores there and it feels bigger. But yeah, and just from my experience as far as like running the store, I get a lot of board game orders from Florida, which is interesting. So, yeah, I mean, we get some from California too, of course, but yeah, Florida's kind of been, I think, maybe the most popular state I've shipped board games to. But we're going to talk about your board game cafe, and we're going to talk about this kind of from a educational angle, but there'll be some, like, I guess, business talk sprinkled in, since we're talking about running educational programming at your board game cafe. And I asked you some questions, and you kind of followed up, and I'm going to share those with everyone so we have some context, and then maybe you can fill in any gaps that I leave out. So you mentioned that 99% of your customers know board games like Monopoly, Scrabble, chess, Life, the classic ones.
Yeah.
But modern ones aren't a very, very new thing. 99%, that's a high number, I think. In the US, I would say it's probably like 80%. I think it's
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think people are becoming more familiar with modern board games, especially because of like games that are very popular. I want to say IPs that are creating different board games, like Exploding Kittens was a big one, and that's kind of a newer style game. Yeah. Cards Against Humanity, I don't really like that game, but it's one that a lot of people are familiar with. There's other like party style games that are kind of more popular too.
Popular too, correct. So I'll tell you what. I stay in suburbs of Mumbai. So there, this concept is completely new. But as I move towards the main city, like in Mumbai, there this percentage would be different. And when I move to South India, there a lot of people have played heavy style games, or they are familiar with a lot of Euro style games, modern games. But in my region where my cafe is situated, this concept is very new. That's why 99%. The best part is that when they come in and then they, we usually give a small demo of 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe we play a game, something like Skull, or maybe we tell them to spend an hour and play Splendor. And then we can see that, their perception and then idea about board games changed completely. So we struggled a lot initially thinking, because, when we opened our cafe, the biggest challenge was that people thought this concept is only for kids. Games are just for kids,
Yeah.
But then now the acceptance is increasing.
So I was going to ask too, I forgot, I wanted to write this down. So as far as your customers, how do they learn about the cafe? So you mentioned like a lot of them don't know about these games. How do they stumble upon your cafe?
So I would say that initially most of our customers, they were just walk-in inquiries. So they are passing by and then they suddenly see, oh, this is something new. We have never seen this before. So can you tell us what is it about? So, when you say games, what all games? Is it like betting games? Is it like card games, or what sort of games? Or do you teach chess? We got a lot of inquiries saying that, do you teach chess or things like that? I said, no, apart from chess, there are a lot of games which you need to explore. So yeah, so those were walk-in inquiries. After that, when, some of the people, who liked playing and then they came in 2-3 times, then till date, the majority of our customers have come through word of mouth publicity.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's interesting. What was the name? It's Kingdom of Games. Is that the name of it? Right?
Kingdom of Board Games.
Kingdom of Board Games. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. I've been calling around looking for a place for our brick and mortar store, and one really interesting conversation with one owner. They thought we were looking for a store to play like poker, like gambling games. Like no, because it's tough. I always go back and forth about using tabletop games as marketing or using board games, because
board games.
Yeah. People know what board games are, but technically what we do are more tabletop games. And then if you are familiar with those terms, then it's more than just like chess, Monopoly, like those games. So it's oh man, it's a challenge. All right. And then I have here too, your customers are between 14 and 35, and some are 7 to 13. You were trying to change the myth. We were talking about this before, is that board games are for kids, right?
Yeah.
What game do you use to kind of share with adults initially? You said Skull and Splendor. Are those kind of the go-to ones that you share to show, like, hey, this is more than just a kid's game, or these are more than just kids' games?
So initially, when we had just opened, we used to give a small demo of Skull. But then with time, we realized that, okay, we need to, tell our audience that when you are indulging, it's not just about, playing 15, 20 minute party style game. So we started, taking up Splendor, King Domino as their first games. So I think these two are a great, first time games, because they are planning and then they know that it's not that easy. It's not just bluffing or party. So Splendor and King Domino top our charts for the first time games.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've been trying to think of how to do this as well, because we're doing pop-ups and like, what game can I introduce so players can play just a round and get a feel of the game? I think King Domino would be cool. King Domino, Splendor. It's been so long since I played Splendor. I know that you have to pick up cards and then you get diamonds to acquire cards. I don't know if you could do that as a round. You might have to like really play a few rounds to get the feel of that game.
Yes. Yes. You need to spend good 15, 20 minutes for like creating that chain. Since it is a deck building game.
Yeah.
Building game.
And that's where the satisfaction comes with those games, is like getting everything you need to acquire that card. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. So, and then we talked about just education in India, and it's pretty traditional. And I would say, like in the U.S., it's similar, where I think there's kind of a battle between the traditional like testing, and that's how we're set up. We're set up for students should be meeting these standards and progressing forward based on these standards and these testing outcomes. Where there's also a push for, well, school should be a little bit more than just tests, right? And I think this last year, even more so, we realized, I think a lot of schools and I mean, teachers, a lot of teachers have always known this, that there's more than just teaching to the test. But I think it's kind of been pushed more towards like social emotional learning is an important part of like a child's education, and learning soft skills that aren't necessarily like things that you can teach in a class, or maybe like added on as a bonus part of learning, or like finance. Finance is a big thing that's kind of been pushed recently. Cool. So
resource planning, risk taking, being able to make decisions.
Yeah, risk taking is a big one, and that's what's awesome about games is you have that environment that's free to mess up. You don't have to worry about making a mistake because it's a game, right? And that's one thing with game-based learning. You talk about using serious games where they're almost like simulations of what you might experience in the real world, but it's not the real world. It's a simulation.
It's not the real. Yeah.
Cool. I guess so. We're going to talk about using educational programming in your cafe, and you had some questions for me. The first one, I'm gonna skip the first one because I want to save it to the end. But do you have any questions, or do we have anything to talk about before we jump into? Maybe we can just tackle those questions. But do you have anything else that you have on your mind as far as?
So I just wish to have a broad idea. So are you are you a full-time teacher, and have you tied up with certain schools wherein you are using board gaming with education as a separate program, or how does it work?
Yeah, I've done a combination of different things. So I've used a lot of games. My background is in English language teaching as far as what topic or subject I've taught in a formal classroom. But I've used like games and after school programs. I've used them as part of tutoring, or gamification as part of my tutoring. Recently, I guess, and this was more along the lines of what we'll talk about, I've been teaching at a high school in their enrichment program, and the name of a couple of the courses, the first one was Among Us, Games and Human Behavior. So we looked at psychology and other things that have to do with human behavior, like persuasion as well. And then I taught game design in a virtual world. So we designed board games remotely, which was really cool because everyone was doing that during the pandemic. Even like $1 million publishing companies that were making board games are trying to figure out ways to create their game remotely, or how you can play it virtually. So we were doing that same thing with high school students, and it was really cool. And then this past summer I taught, I don't remember the title of the course. I think it's just fun with board games. We were trying to because it's a summer course and we have to get students like signed up for it. So we tried to make just a kind of fun title as much as possible. And I carried over a lot of the stuff that I used in the spring, like using snake oil for persuasion. And then other things I've done, like I gamified a semester. I used Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective to gamify a semester. And we've also developed a gamification toolkit. I think you can see it behind the chessboard there. It's the blue. Yes. Yeah. And that's been put on the back burner because it's an in-person toolkit, and I haven't really had a lot of time to develop it further over the pandemic. We'll maybe revisit it like next year, but it's definitely, anyone watching or listening, you can definitely reach out to me. We do have, and if you want to take a look, I'll send it over to you too. It's usable. Like there's a module in there, and there's a lot of tips for a teacher that's looking to gamify their semester. And it talks about different strategies that are important. And that's something maybe we'll talk about too, is like, using badges and why you might use a badge in your classroom, or earning experience points, and why that might be fun to use part of your game cafe. Like students might receive experience points for coming to the cafe and attending a game-based learning lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think like with that, you want to be careful because this is one mistake I made, and it's kind of maybe goes into one of your questions that you hadn't asked about challenges. Like leaderboards are not something you want to really highlight because it's easy for students to be discouraged if they're on the bottom of the leaderboard.
True.
Yeah, and that's something I learned the hard way when we used this in my wife's classroom. We had one student who just started giving away his stuff that he was earning in class as a part of the game because he's like, well, I'm all the way at the bottom. Here, you can have it. So...
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, so, I mean, he is a high school kid, and he was kind of having fun with it, but at the same time, the leaderboard was not doing what we wanted it to do, which was engage and encourage students to participate. It was kind of having the opposite effect. Yeah, but that's kind of my background as far as how I've used game-based learning or gamification.
So, what exactly is the key difference? I mean, if your experience says that, leaderboard is something which, might be tricky. I mean, it may encourage a few of people, but it may also discourage a lot of the others. So then how do you go about creating this batch system?
Yeah, so one thing you can do, and I did this as part of, so a couple things. You can use experience points that are not necessarily a leaderboard, but you group students together. So in my Sherlock Holmes class, I had groups of detectives. So these detective groups, they earned, we called it knowledge points instead of experience points. And they could spend those KP. Have you played Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective?
No.
So in the game, you go to different parts of London and you visit those areas and you interview people. You try to gather more clues. So in order for students to be able to do that in the game, they had to spend their knowledge points. And they would acquire those knowledge points through things like coming to class on time, completing their homework. So they weren't evaluated based on performance, but just evaluated based on doing something, like completing something.
Correct.
And you can also do something, Brooklyn Game Lab has this cool, I don't know what they call it, but creating guilds or some other form of groups. And as a group, you earn points. And you can also do different things like kind of help the groups that are lower down catch up. And that's a common thing that you'll see in board games too. There are catch-up mechanics. I'm trying to think of some catch-up mechanics that I've experienced recently.
Oh. There is this amazing game, Quacks of Quedlinburg. It has an amazing catch-up mechanism. Have you played that game?
Yeah. What is the catch-up mechanic? I'm trying to think of what it would be.
So if you explode, you get to choose between, do you want victory points for that round or do you want to spend your money? And then there are these rat tails. I mean, person who is lagging behind in score can use rat tails to start that particular round ahead in their pot.
That's right. Yeah, the rat tails. I forgot about those. Yeah, and I mean, most people are familiar with Mario, right? If you're Mario Kart, if you're in last place, you get like a really awesome item to catch up to first place. So thinking about things like that, and it's good to plan for stuff like that, but you don't necessarily have to have something there. Like you can kind of think it up as you go. And that's what a good GM or DM does, is they think of things to help the group perform better or just make it out in time. Yeah. Should we go to these questions or do you have any other?
Yes.
Okay. So
yes. Let's go to this question.
Yeah. Do you want to just choose one and I'll kind of answer with what I have here?
So we want to keep the first one for the last, correct?
Sure. Just not the first question.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot.
Yeah. Let's start with challenges then. So describe 3 of your biggest challenges when you started off, and how did you exactly overcome these challenges?
Yeah, and this one was another hard one for me to answer because I have a bunch of challenges all the time, and it's hard for me to think back to what they were at that time. But one that was big was coming up with a theme for my semester, and this is something you might want to think about applying to your game cafe if you have a program, or even if you just have a way to integrate some sort of fun theme as a part of it. And once I thought of the theme, a lot of other things started connecting and clicking. And that theme, like I mentioned, was Sherlock Holmes. And what was really cool is it's perfect for English language because a lot of students are familiar with Sherlock Holmes. They're familiar with that story. They're familiar with that, like, I guess, I don't know, the Sherlock Holmes, like the detective. And so when I came up with that theme, I had ideas like, okay, I can form detective groups. I used Google Classroom and I titled the classroom like London instead of just like English 101 or whatever. I created knowledge points. I had them use the knowledge points to unlock different parts in the game. So once I came up with the theme, I was able to sprinkle in like language that flavored the classroom. Like I mentioned, like London. I would ask them to get into their detective groups in class, and other ways I can make the theme meaningful. So using knowledge points, like that actually affects part of the class. So, and I mentioned Brooklyn Game Lab. They do something, if I remember correctly, we have an episode with one of the program managers, his name's Wes, but they do something where like guilds, where when students enroll in one of their programs, they get put into a different guild. And I'm not sure what they title it or whatever, but it's kind of similar to, if you're familiar with Harry Potter and the sorting hat, they put on the hat and they're signed like Gryffindor or Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff or whatever.
Yeah.
So doing something like that. And then we talked about the leaderboards, then groups can earn points as a group instead. Yeah, that was the big challenge. And what helped me think of the theme was really just consuming a lot of content related to game-based learning and gamification. Yeah. So as far as your cafe, like what are you looking for like cohorts of students, or are you looking for like one day and you can come any of those days, or kind of logistically, how are you going to think about setting up the program?
So, see, right now, before, let's talk about times before COVID. So before COVID, we used to run weekend sessions with kids.
Okay.
And then that was 2.5 hour long session wherein, kids are just coming in and then they are playing normal games like maybe Dr. Eureka, dexterity games, or, quick, fun party games sort of things. So that was in the initial days. Then we got affected by the COVID because we all went into lockdown. And now when we are starting again, taking weekend batches, so now we have started taking a lot of, strategy games with them. Like how I told you that we played Catan this afternoon. And then that the other day we played point salad with them. So, I mean, point salad is not really a very heavy strategy game, but it is not a party game as such. So I want to make a very, structured approach wherein I know that, I can tell parents that your kids will have to come for, let's say, 4 weekends, and this is a module. These are the, skills that we can, like cover with these games. So these are the skill sets which will get improved. So something like that.
Okay.
I mean, it's a very rough idea, because obviously, I mean, these sessions is not going to replace their school learning, because right now in these sessions, the board gaming as such, it is not recognized as much. And obviously there are certain sets of things that they can only learn in school. So this will be just an add-on thing, and just to boost up their overall personality.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of going off of that, and just maybe some suggestions. One thing that would be really cool and would help with kind of communicating to parents as far as what they are learning and developing in your, whether it's just a 1-day class or they come back several different classes, you can create like a punch card, or a skill card. So the punch card is like, maybe you do a variety board game punch card. So every different game they play, they get a stamp or a punch on their card. And then you can do maybe like a skill punch card, and they get a stamp or punch on that skill. Maybe they're working on dexterity or they're working on communication. And you would title that punch card something really fun. Like you could tie it into whatever theme you're doing. And then that way the parent is like, they see the skill card. Okay, my kid went to class or went to your program and they developed this skill today. I mean, they're working towards a badge. And then when they unlock that badge, maybe you have a spot on your wall in the cafe that's like board game wall of fame or something. And when they get a badge, you have every student's name and they get their badge next to their name. Yeah, I know. I think that would be pretty cool. And then like certificates too.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, and that works really well too, because you don't have to worry about students coming in and enrolling in a full program necessarily. I mean, if that's something you want to do, you could do something different with that too, like certificates or something. But it's because that's one thing that I'm worried about when I start doing programs is like, well, what if I don't get a full class for that day, but I still have like 3 students? Well, I have these other things we can do with those 3 students. Or maybe I don't have a parent that wants to commit to a full week of classes. They just want to drop in for a day. Well, they can come in for a day and get a card.
Because what happens, I mean, even if I know that there are certain kids who would want to complete the entire program, but then what if they're not available for one particular weekend? So then so the main struggle was that if we are designing, let's say, a module which asks them to attend for 4 weekends, what if some of them can't make it for one of the Saturdays? So then does the entire batch gets affected, or does that student or does that kid has to spend an extra session, whatever? But then this is a cool idea. I mean, having a punch-in kind of a system, this would be really great. Because it is very flexible. I mean,
it's flexible and it encourages people to engage and come back for the lessons too, which is directly affects your cafe, right? And I had another thing, but I can't remember what I was gonna ask. Maybe it'll come to me.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So we kind of got off track, but that's okay. Do you have another question?
So let's say that I mean, if you have to, so what happens is, I mean, we know that when we are playing board games and when we are doing this for a long enough period of time, it brings about certain changes in us, and it sort of develops our brain and mind. But then it's very hard to prove it in tangible form or in something that, visibly, which is impactful. So my question to you is, if you have to prove the educational power of a board game to a set of parents who are kind of resistant to this approach, so which games would you start with to, show the immediate visible impact? And then how can we go about it?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question, because it's something that I've been trying to do for the past like 3 years. And it's not that parents don't realize, it's more of how do we communicate that message clearly and effectively, and especially as like a marketing lens, like how do I create a video on that someone wants to actually sit down and watch, and they realize, oh, these games are actually really helpful for my child or for my students in my class, for engaging my students, and it's worth it to take that extra time to teach the game because of the benefits or the long-term benefits of it. I kind of put them over here, but I have a couple games just a couple lines of games. So Genius Games, are you familiar with Genius Games? They do. So it's like super clear that this is a game that has some educational content. I mean, it's about the human cell, the Journal of Science. So they do science and math-based games. So they have Cytosis. They have a bunch. Ion is another one about elemental compounds. This one's about the periodic table of elements. Yeah, and they have another one that I'm really excited about called Outnumbered, and it's superhero themed, but it's math. It's a math-based game. We'll hopefully be getting that soon too. And then another company, I put it down here, is Capital Gains Studio. They're from Singapore. This one,
Okay.
I think I think this game's really great at teaching the economic cycle. So it goes from like growth, stagnation, and around, and you can influence the government, talk about like influence the government on making different decisions. So like creating a recession sooner or getting out of the recession quicker by maybe adding more money to the economic cycle. And this, as well as Genius Games, has an educational guide included. So it talks about exactly why they included some mechanics and how it relates to real world, like real world economics or like the human cell.
That sounds quite interesting.
Yeah. And then the last one, I think maybe you're familiar with Haba games.
Yes.
Yeah. And these are easy for younger kids, especially this. I wish I had a better example, but all my Haba games are back at home for pop-ups. But it explicitly tells you what it's good at. So some of the games, they have 3 points, and one says like color recognition or matching. One that's really cool that I'm excited for, but I think they're discontinuing. It's called like Rabbit Hop or something, and you have planks of boards that you have to connect from one rock to another rock. And what's really cool for younger kids is they kind of have to gauge how long that board is to connect it to the next rock. Because if you don't plan it correctly, you have to go back to the start. I think it's a little bit more obvious about games teaching for younger players, right?
What age groups do you cater to? I mean, because I can see that a lot of these Hava games, they are for kids who are as young as 2 years of age, correct? Like 2+.
Yeah.
So what is your primary age group?
At BGE, we do all ages, like from 2 to adults. So we even have some like, I'm trying to think, some high level like, oh man, maybe not. No, yeah, wait. I can't remember if we ended up adding that game. We do have Anatomy Flux. I know. I'm trying to think of a different game, but I'm not sure. I don't think we put it on our site. We're planning to. But Anatomy Flux, it's about the human anatomy, so the human body, and there's a lot of like pretty complex medical terms in there. So that's like, university students. I think medical students could potentially use it. I mean, it might be a little bit too easy for some medical students, but and like Cytosis it's about the human cell. A lot of it's over my head at this point because it's been a long time since I've studied that in science class.
You have played it, correct.
Yeah. But I guess more like high school level stuff. But yeah.
One of the other challenges, like as we are speaking, that is coming in my head is that when we take up any game, which, I mean, I don't have a big collection of educational games as such, but whenever I'm trying to pick up a game which has certain, such concepts, then it gets boring for kids. I mean, they think of this session to be that, okay, now I have come here to be away from my studies. And then again, you are telling me about my, school concepts. So I don't want to listen to you. And then they sort of feel, okay, now let's play something exciting. So how do you cater to this? I mean, how can we go about it? What can be done about this?
Yeah. So I would say a couple things with these games, like Genius Games specifically. They're modeled after other games. So what's cool about it is like I don't know a lot about the human cell. I know a few things, and playing the game, it refreshed my memory, but I can know absolutely nothing about it and still enjoy the game. And actually like participate in the game. I don't have to know the cell. It's based off of kind of like Lords of Waterdeep style game. It's like a worker placement game. But then also like you could look at, it's a little bit more challenging to look at games and pull out other things that the game teaches, but there are other games that do that. Like I mentioned Snake Oil and Persuasion. So we looked at, in my class, we looked at different commercials and how they appeal to like pathos, logos, and ethos. So either our emotion, logic, or our credibility. And then we played Snake Oil, and in Snake Oil, you have to convince people to buy your product. So you're given 2 cards, and you have to convince a customer based on these two random cards. It could be like, I don't know, coffee pen. And you can be like, hey, I know you need a coffee pen because while you write, you also can drink some coffee out of the pen. And it's really great for like staying active and awake while you're writing your diary or whatever. And you're convincing a specific customer. So the customer is like a robot or an alien or a teacher or whatever the customer is. So you have to appeal to that specific customer. So like looking at what skills those games teach is good too. Another example, Point Salad. Roger, who is really awesome and helps with a lot of our games or science-based games, he talked about Point Salad and kind of told me about it. And you use multiplication and addition when you count points, right? Have you played Point Salad?
Correct. Yes. Yes.
So like you don't know you're doing math and addition or multiplication and addition really until maybe the end, I guess. I have never played it, but
yes.
So you
I played it last weekend with my kids, during our kids session. So I mean, it was quite interesting. I mean, otherwise, if I tell them that okay, this game is going to focus on these things, their faces would go like, But then there are these simple, interesting games which actually impart you that it teaches you how to do it without even saying it out loud that okay, I'm going to teach you this. So those are amazing games. For example, game like Set. It's a classic game, where you have to recognize patterns. But whenever I open that and I ask kids, okay, let's play Set for, let's say, 10-15 minutes as a break, they are not interested. They are just not interested. They want something, fun and engaging.
Yeah. So. And that's another thing too, is like, we're all different game players and not every game's going to appeal to us. Right. And that's one thing I've kind of started to learn now that I've played a lot more games is like, yes, I'll play some of these games just because I want other people to enjoy it and learn about this. But at the same time, I'd much rather be playing this other game. So yeah.
True.
Yeah. I've been told about Set though, that it's a good one, and we need to get that added to our store too. Oh, another cool game too. Also a Singapore company. It's up there. Potato Pirates Enter the Spudnet. So it's a clever like quirky.
What is it? Potato Pirates.
Potato Pirates. So they have 3 different games. One is about the internet, I believe, is the first one. This one here is the one we have. It's about cybersecurity, and the third one is about I don't know what the third one is. Just came out. I can't remember. But they're like cute, just potatoes. Like that's the character in the game. So they're like cute potatoes. They're pirates. Like that's kind of exciting. It's not super explicit what you're learning because in this game, Enter the Spudnet, you're actually pirates trying to export and import data, but it's actually like, pirate stuff. But when you pull it out and you look at what's actually going on, they're teaching you about cybersecurity. So yes, there's all sorts of games coming up like that. I mean, I get a lot of emails about different games that are out there, that are being made on Kickstarter. But yeah, I think it's just maybe not so much a lack of the games, but finding the right ones and maybe learning what works with each student or student group maybe. Yeah. Other questions?
I think we are totally off track from the list of questions that we made, because I mean the casual flow of conversation, I think we both are finding this approach more interesting.
Appealing. Yeah, it's good. The questions were good though too, because it gives me some ways to brainstorm and think.
Yes. So is there any basic structure that you keep in mind when you design these game-based learning programs? I mean, how do you go about it?
I think the biggest thing, and we kind of keep talking about this, are the outcomes. What are you trying to accomplish? And that's one thing I asked about your cafe is like, and you already mentioned, you're using these things as supportive to the learning. It's not a replacement of the school. It's like extra stuff. And you also want it to be fun. So like, I think in that case, the educational aspect is important, but it's not the pillar of everything, right? The pillar of everything is making a fun, engaging program, and by the wayside, students and the people that come into your cafe are learning something in addition to having fun and being engaged. So I also, I kind of wrote down some notes to answer this question, and like providing a safe, engaging space for students to reinforce what they're supposed to be learning at that age. So one thing that's cool you might look at is like asking schools what it is they should be learning at that age. Because I've taught a lot of different age groups and tutored a lot of different age groups, I'm pretty familiar with where a student should be in math at that age, where a student should be at science at that age, what they're learning in science in 5th grade, for example, and kind of pairing that with it. And I mentioned snake oil. So if you were to, again, the difference between like weekend things that you just have and students can drop in or drop out versus creating an entire like week-long program is important too. Some things we wanted to do this summer, but we had to kind of wait because we couldn't find a place and we didn't really market as well as I think we could have, was like Pokemon. So I used Pokemon as an IP to attract people that are like kids that are really, well, one, parents are familiar with IP, and then also kids like Pokemon, right? It's a popular like thing. And then targeting 5-year-olds to maybe like 8, and what they were going to do in the class is come up with their own Pokemon, create their own Pokemon, write a biography about their Pokemon, where it came from, details about it, describe their Pokemon, draw their Pokemon, and then also learn a bit about the card game. So that was the program was Pokemon themed, but they were learning some writing skills, some creativity, and then a bit about the game as well. So like thinking about a week-long program as a whole. Another one was like 21st century skills in tabletop games. So I was using a lot of the things that I used in the high school. Yeah, I don't know. I think hopefully that helps.
Yes, it does. So basically, you try to have one particular strong point as the, like how you would go about like attracting more kids towards it. And then around it, by the side, they're learning different things and having fun.
Yeah, and like with the Pokemon, and we go back to that idea of, well, there's learning here, so I don't want to do it. Well, if I'm writing a story about a Pokemon and a biography about a Pokemon as a kid, I'm going to love doing that, and I'm developing these writing skills, right? So how do you engage through like intrinsic motivation of kids too? Like what are they excited about? How do you get them excited where they just don't even think they're learning?
Yes. An interesting game like as simple as Dixit. I mean, it teaches you so many things. But then, so let's say that, while we are playing Dixit and we know that why we are playing this Dixit. But then let's say if kids are coming up with one-word clues. I mean, so how do you motivate them to, be a little more creative and think out of the box for their clues? So do you provide any like some push to them, or do you give any incentives to kids who have come up with the most interesting clues, or what?
Yeah, and this is a great question, because I think it can go both ways, and I get this question asked on the other side too, is like, what do you do with students who are misbehaving during a game? Like, how do you keep them involved in the game? Well, you can implement some rules in the game that kind of punish him as a player or her as a player in the game, because it's still part of the game. It's not like outside of the game. But then on the other end with Dixit, what you could do is like everyone votes maybe each round, as far as like everyone goes around and you kind of vote maybe who had the best clue, and you kind of put it in a hat, and then at the end, whoever had the best clue gets some bonus points at the end of the game. So like implementing different scoring ways that influence the game is cool too. And it's kind of unique to every game, right? Like Dixit, I think, oh man, I can't think. There was another game that I changed the rules of recently, but I can't remember what it was. I just remember having to do it to motivate students to engage in the
Was it
content.
trap words?
Trap words is one. Yeah, definitely done something where we did 3 groups instead of 2. Yeah. I think that was one. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think, is there another question? Maybe we have just a couple more minutes. We can go to number 1 if we want to do that one.
Yes, let's go to number 1.
Okay.
Yeah. So my question is, if you could start a school completely following a game-based learning approach, then what exactly would it look like? Like, what would be the schedule? What would be the grading model? What would be the task of the teachers or educators? So what is your vision and motto of such school?
Yeah, and it's a really tough question, I think. But I think,
I'm sure you would have a dream like this.
What's that?
I'm sure you would have imagined a dream school like this.
Yeah, I would. The challenge, though, is, and we talked about this, is the system versus what we want to do. There is a school, and I was trying to find it, and there is or was a school that did this. It was like a video game, quote unquote, video game school. You went to school as a video game player or whatever character. I couldn't find the school because I wanted to read about it again before this question. But I know, like, one thing you definitely need is a group of educators who are not only passionate about education, but also about game-based learning and gamification and learning through play. Like you need, because you need like experts in different subject areas, right? I think might be, I don't know if I want to say easier, but less specific experts in different subject areas. You would need less of those teachers if you did it for younger ages. But yeah, I think one thing that is important, and I think I would lean into the most, is creating a school culture that's part of the game and not so much every lesson. But like, I had an example, like every year you might have a different theme for the school. So one year it might be like a superhero theme, and you integrate different ways to make that part of the theme. So each class maybe chooses a superhero, like or creates their own superhero as a class. And then one week or once a month, you have a dilemma that needs to be solved in the school or in the city. And each class has to come up with a reason why their superhero might be great at solving that dilemma. So creating that competition of in-group, out-group, and then they're also working collaboratively as a class.
As a class, true.
Yeah. There's also, I have some books. This one, The Multiplayer Classroom. So this is more a book on creating a gamification in a class by Lee Sheldon, The Multiplayer Classroom. It's pretty in-depth, and he has some data and stuff from the classes that he created. But yeah, I think the culture in the school as a whole would be fun, but then creating game-based lessons, I don't know if it would be part of every single thing you do. But I also have a dream of having every teacher having a staple game-based lesson that they have a part of their quarter or their semester, like something they do every year. And I think it's fun too, because you think about, and I talk to a lot of teachers, a lot of people, they remember those things about their teachers. They're like, oh, I remember my one teacher who did a mock election that year, and we played kind of a game where we were electing a president. Or like, for my example, I remember the stock market game that I played back in like 5th grade, and I had to choose a stock, and then we played like kind of a game where we tracked that stock throughout the semester. Yeah.
That sounds so much fun. Sounds so much fun. Yeah. I wish that this comes true someday.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. And like I mentioned, I'm excited to hear about some updates with your cafe, and hopefully when we have our brick and mortar, we can kind of share some ideas that we've been able to do as well.
Sure. Yes. I'm so excited.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And then maybe before we go, if anybody's curious and they want to follow, I know I've seen some really cool posts on your Instagram. If they want to like reach out to you or keep track of your cafe, how can they do that?
So they can follow us on Instagram, Kingdom of Board Games. We are trying to, we are putting things together to soon start our YouTube channel, wherein we are planning to put in, more content about how to play and, our experiences, some playthroughs and things like that. So those things are under pipeline, so they can follow us there as well.
Cool. Yeah, and that's really cool. We need more content to share the hobby of board games. So that's really exciting.
This community is amazing. I mean, this has been the best thing that has happened to me. I mean, finding my passion about board games, because this is the best community ever, I have ever come across. Everyone is so passionate about what they are doing, and they have so many varied experiences, and it's so much fun. I mean, there is so much of positivity around here. So it's amazing.
Yeah. And maybe one more thing before we go. How did you get into the board game hobby?
Oh, so we had played the basic games, right? So one evening, it was a family get-together, and we were playing a simple game like Pictionary, and we lost track of time. And then from there, the idea came, it would be such a wonderful thing if, we have a place wherein we can just sit and play games. Then during the same year, I visited US. And that time I came to know the board gaming world is huge. There are so many titles. I never knew that. So, we started with Codenames, then we went to Dixit. So these are our early days games. So, the kind of entertainment that we got out of those games, and how we just forgot about everything. And especially we didn't touch our mobiles for hours together. That was amazing.
Yeah.
So I think from there on, I have never looked back.
Yeah, and that's just yeah, that's awesome. I think board games are the only time that I'm able to put away my phone for good and like not look at it. It's I don't know. I'm always checking emails and everything, social media and stuff. So awesome. Well, thank you so much, Prisha. We'll keep in touch, and again, follow Kingdom of Board Games to stay up to date on the Board Game Cafe.
Thank you, Dustin, for your time. Thank you so much. Your experiences, I'm sure that they are going to help us a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.